Part 5 of the Sani Pass covers the section from the 7th to the 15th kilometer, which is a relatively easy section with flatter gradients and includes the South African border post. If you intend driving this pass, it's important to watch parts 1 through 4 sequentially, which include the Google Earth orientation animations, as well as other important information on technical, historical, safety and tourism matters. At the 7.5 kilometer point, the road crosses a tributary of the Mkomazana River. In the event of a flash flood higher up in the mountains, this crossing can be a death trap. The best policy is to walk the stream along both proposed tracks using a stick for balance. If it looks too risky to walk it, then rather don't drive it. At the 8 kilometer mark, you'll arrive at the South African border control point. Park your vehicle and take your passport to the office to have it stamped. This also applies to each of your passengers. This border post offers clean and neat ablution facilities. Up till this point, you've only completed about 1/3 of the distance of the pass. By the end of the year 2021, the road will have been tarred up till this point. Going back into the history of the area, the rinderpest epidemic of 1895 wiped out a great many cattle and stranded many of the transport riders as well. Then the locust plague of 1896 was the final straw for many who gave up and moved to easier farming areas, so few of the original settlers remained by the end of the decade in 1899. The outbreak of the Boer War in 1899 saw many of the farmers being called to arms with the border-mounted rifles, and most of the Underberg men were involved in the siege of Ladysmith. The hostilities, however, were confined to the northern parts of the colony, and no fighting ever took place in the Underberg area. A new wave of arrivals had taken over from where the original settlers had left off. Communications began to improve, roads were begun, and a regular postcard service ran between Underberg and Pietermaritzburg, carrying mail, passengers and small parcels. Farming was still hard. The climate did not lend itself to crop farming, and the grass provided little sustenance to cattle and sheep in winter, when crude protein levels in the grass dropped to almost zero. Summer grazing, however, was good and fattened the stock nicely. The railway line reached Underberg in 1916, allowing farmers at last a ready access to markets, and thus made farming here more profitable. The First World War interrupted this decade and drew a lot of the young farmers away to the war, leaving their wives or relatives to run the farms. The decade ended with the influenza pandemic, which claimed a great many lives all over the world and even in the Underberg district. The 1930s began with a disastrous drought which lasted 3 long years. This was a very difficult period with a Great Depression that financially ruined many people. Sheep could be bought for 5 shillings, and if they were shorn, they were worth 3 shillings and 6pence. The wool accrued in value, and some people actually made money. The Second World War years were a difficult period for many whose men were away. A number of farms changed hands, especially after the war ended in 1945. The Sani Pass was then opened to vehicular traffic, and this increased trade with Natal and allowed for phenomenal development in Mokotlong and the surrounding areas. The village main roads and the road between the two villages were tarred in 1959, and a bypass built at the entrance to Underberg. This came straight down the hill instead of veering off to the right past the Underberg School and the Underberg Congregational Church and down what is known today as the Old Main Road. The Natal Parks Board was formed from the old Natal Provincial Association Wildlife Department and took over control of fishing in 1947, and in 1949 the Underberg Congregational Church was built and opened during the ministry of Reverend Headley Park. After Kenya's independence in 1963, there was an influx of farmers, most of which found farming conditions in Underberg too harsh and moved off again after a few years. The year 1962 brought heavy snowfalls and interrupted certain public services. Be sure to watch parts 6 and 7 of the Sani Pass.